Welcome everybody to TechCraft, this is Rob, and in today's video we'll be talking all about external storage options for the iPad Pro. Let's go. So a few of you have asked me to do a review of the new GNARBOX SSD, and I picked mine up last week, and yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good drive. It definitely hasn't blown me away though, and it's quite an expensive drive. So I thought rather than just do a review of this drive, I would do a review of all the drives that I'm using and then maybe hint at why I think the GNARBOX isn't necessarily the best choice for every use case. Now, let me just say straight up, all the drives that I'm talking about in this video I paid for with my own money, so I'm not sponsored by any of the manufacturers, and I will put links to all of the drives in the description below if you're interested in picking up one for yourself. But let's dive straight in and take a look at the price and the capacity of the drives that I'm using. So I have around 5 drives that I use on a regular basis with my iPad Pro, and the first one is this, the SanDisk USB thumb drive. So I got the 64GB version of this, which I paid about £16 in the UK, and it runs about $14 in the US. It does come in a 128GB and 256GB versions as well. And if you buy that 256GB, you're looking at around about 18 cents per gigabyte for storage in this tiny form factor. I also have this, which is the Samsung T5 SSD. Mine is the 500GB version. I have quite a few of these. Actually, I shoot directly to these drives from my camera. I paid £85 for this in the UK, and it runs at about $90 on Amazon in the US. So you can buy this drive in various colors and in various sizes. It comes in a 1TB and a 2TB version as well. And if you buy the 2TB version in the US, it's around about $300. So that's around about 15 cents per gigabyte for storage in this tiny form factor. I also have this contraption I made myself, which is a pluggable NVMe enclosure and a Samsung 970 EVO NVMe drive inside it. And this just allows me to connect any NVMe drive to USB-C on the iPad or my laptop. The enclosure itself is about £50 in the UK and around about $50 in the US. And the drive, I think I paid £190 in the UK, but it's actually really cheap in the US. You can get the same drive for $170 in the US, and that's for the 1TB version of this NVMe drive. If you consider just the storage, you're looking at around about 17 cents per gigabyte for this form factor. But if you factor in the cost of the enclosure as well, which you'll definitely have to buy the first time you use this kind of setup, then you're looking at around about 22 cents per gigabyte. Of course, though, you can keep the enclosure and upgrade the drive later on. And if you have other devices where you can use the NVMe drive, this is actually a pretty good setup. So I also have this cool drive, which is the Western Digital My Passport Pro Wireless. I think before the GNARBOX, this was kind of like the go-to device for photographers and filmmakers who want to back up their media on the go. I have the 4TB version, which I paid £200 for in the UK. And it runs about $230, $240 in the US. So you're looking somewhere in the region of 6 cents per gigabyte when you buy this drive. They also do an SSD version as well, only up to 2TB, and I think that runs around about $600, $700 in the US. And then finally, we've got the GNARBOX 2, which I bought the 512GB version, which was an eye-watering £600 here in the UK. They do a 1TB version, which is £900 UK and $900 US, but that's outrageous. You're talking 90 cents per gigabyte for the storage here. So for the GNARBOX to make sense, it really has to have a lot of extra features. So in case you're wondering why I've got 5 drives that I use with my iPad Pro, let me just give you a quick breakdown of what I'm using them for. I use the SanDisk thumb drive as a quick backup document shuttling type drive. I keep it in my bag just in case I need to move a file to a machine when I'm working or whatever. I use the Samsung T5 SSDs as a drive that I shoot to from my Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera. I then use the Samsung 970 NVMe drive in the enclosure as my edit drive. So when I'm working on the videos on my laptop, I'm typically editing directly on that drive. For the longest time, I've been using the My Passport Pro as my photo backup drive of choice. I can't remember how long I've had that, but it's been a great workhorse. And then now obviously I've picked up the GNARBOX for review and to see whether or not it's going to replace the My Passport Pro in my bag. For price, I think that the Western Digital My Passport Pro is the clear winner. 6 cents per gigabyte, 4TB in one drive. You're an investment of $230 and you've got a really solid drive. If you're not really interested in huge storage capacities, then I actually think the SanDisk thumb drive is really good as well, because you can buy a drive for $20, 64GB, and for a lot of document shuffling, it's actually pretty good. Let's now take a quick look at how all these drives connect to the iPad Pro. So all of these drives, apart from the My Passport Pro wireless have USB-C connections, so they can plug directly into the iPad Pro. The My Passport Pro has an old style USB 3, and it's actually got a micro B connector, which is a really weird connector for the drive itself. Now, I've had great success connecting this to my iPad using this Anker USB-C to USB-A dongle. I have done it through my USB dock as well, but actually the performance is not quite as nice, and I much prefer to use this little dongle instead to get faster transfer speeds. A really nice feature of the SanDisk thumb drive is that it actually has USB-C on one side and it has USB-A on the other side. So if you have an old-fashioned laptop that doesn't have USB-C on it, or if you're trying to connect to your desktop maybe with no USB-C, it's a really good way to shuffle files about. I think that this piece of kit really has a place in anybody's bag. It's so cheap, and there are so many times when I'm working with people in a consulting gig where I just want to shuffle some files to them and they don't have USB-C, and I can just chuck it on this thumb drive and away we go. The Samsung T5 and the pluggable NVMe enclosure both come with USB-C and USB-C to USB-A cables, and these cables are really high quality. They have really high data rates. If you try to use one of these drives, say with your charging cable, you'll probably end up with data rates around about 20 megabytes per second, which is way below what these drives can do, as we'll see shortly. The GNARBOX also comes with a USB-C cable, but no USB-A cable. I have to say, for these three drives, the quality of the cables is really incredible, and the GNARBOX comes with a really nice, really long USB-C cable, which I think is just kind of like indicative of the quality and the build quality you get in the GNARBOX. So all of these drives, when connected via USB, work as standard USB mass storage drives, apart from the GNARBOX, which has got this really weird function. You have to actually specifically enable USB mass storage on the GNARBOX. You can't just plug the drive in. Most of these drives are powered straight from the actual device, straight from your iPad, and the My Passport Pro will actually kind of like stop using its own power, turn off the Wi-Fi function, and just become a mass storage device the moment you plug it into your iPad, which is a really nice function. The GNARBOX, though, you have to restart it and reboot it into the USB mass storage mode, and I timed the reboot. It takes like 45 seconds. It's a minor niggle for sure, but when you pay £600, £900 for a drive, you kind of want it to be a little bit slicker than this. So I hinted at this already, and it's definitely one of the killer features of the My Passport Pro and of the GNARBOX. They both have wireless connectivity. You can connect to them over Wi-Fi. Now, there are two modes for this. You can connect directly to the drive, so the drive will make itself a wireless access point and you can connect to that. Or you can connect the drive to your home or office Wi-Fi network, and then your iPad or laptop will find the drive on that network. When you are connected to the drive over Wi-Fi, you can use the dedicated app that comes with the drive. So there's a MyCloud app for the My Passport Pro, and there is a SafeKeep app for the GNARBOX, or you can see the contents of the drive in the iPad OS Files app. The first time you set these drives up, you'll have to connect to them over Wi-Fi directly, because that's how you tell the drive what your home network Wi-Fi connection details are. So it's here that I have another complaint about the GNARBOX. When you use the Wi-Fi on the My Passport Pro, it will connect to any network it's connected to previously. So once you've configured it to connect to your home network or to your office network, it will connect to that network again if it's nearby. But it also will always present its own Wi-Fi access point. You don't have to tell it which mode you want it to be in. The GNARBOX does not do this. It has a really finicky interface. The first time you turn it on, it will present its own Wi-Fi access point. You have to connect to that Wi-Fi access point in the SafeKeep app, browse through the settings in the connection manager, and then you can tell it which network you want it to connect to. It doesn't even seem, as far as I can tell, to remember the passwords of these networks. So each time you're telling it, hey, please connect to my home network, and here's the password for that network. If you're in USB mass storage mode, you've got to reboot it before you can even do this. That's another 45 seconds wasted while you wait for the drive to reboot. And you're doing this every time. It's not like, hey, set up your home network once and then come back to that network later on and it auto connects. Nope, you've got to do the whole process every time for every network. Now, this is a kind of minor niggle, I think, but again, for an expensive drive, you don't expect these niggles. It should work a lot smoother than it does. So one thing I want to say at this point, though, about the GNARBOX is that the actual on-drive interface is very slick. The buttons are really responsive, and having the LCD screen there telling you what mode it's in, telling you whether it's connected to the home network or not is really, really useful. The My Passport Pro can only really signal what it's doing via these LED lights, and I'm always forgetting what the lights mean. And that's a kind of frustration, but I'm not sure that this screen and these buttons are worth the extra money you pay for the GNARBOX. So before we move on to take a look at the speed of these drives, I just want to show you one more cool feature that I like in the My Passport Pro, and that is SMB file sharing. So if you open up the Wi-Fi settings in the My Cloud app and tap on the little I for your home network, there's an option to share contents. Now, definitely do not enable this on a public Wi-Fi access point. This is going to open up your drive to everybody who's connected to your network. But at home, it works really, really well. Once you enable this, you can then go to your Windows computer or to your MacBook or whatever, and you can see this drive as a standard shared network drive. You don't have to have any special apps installed or anything. It just works by default. Okay, let's take a look at the speed of these drives. So I tested all of these drives on my MacBook Pro using the FIO open source disk testing utility. I ran 4 tests per drive, sequential and random read, and then sequential and random write. So as you can see, the read performance on the Samsung T5 and on the Samsung 970 NVMe drive is incredible, both sequential and random. The GNARBOX is not substantially faster in sequential read than even the SanDisk thumb drive or the Western Digital My Passport Pro. Now, the My Passport Pro is fairly dreadful at random read, which is what you would expect for a non-SSD type drive. I imagine if you had the My Passport Pro SSD that you would see much better speeds here. In write performance, the story is much the same. The Samsung drives completely blow out all the other drives, and the GNARBOX is a bit faster here than the My Passport Pro, but I think that speed differential would disappear if you had the My Passport Pro SSD. For write performance, the thumb drive is fairly terrible. I'm not quite sure why that is, and I did run this test a ton of times to see if I was getting any weird errors, but the write performance is pretty bad. Obviously, though, you wouldn't be using that thumb drive for any real work. It's more of a backup document shuffling type drive. So there's nothing like FIO available on the iPad. So I did my own sequential I/O tests. I chose sequential I/O because I think for filmmakers and photographers, this is probably the thing you're most going to be interested in. And let's take a look at the results. So the first thing to notice here is that the numbers are significantly lower on the iPad than they are on the MacBook Pro. Now, I think that is an artifact of how the tests were done. On the MacBook Pro, I'm able to get direct drive access, whereas on the iPad, the only way I can write to the drives in my test suite is to use file access through the Files API, which is never going to be as quick as direct drive access. But I think the Files API is how most apps will be accessing the drive, so this is probably accurate for the workload you'll see when you're using the drive with the iPad. For iPad performance, though, these drives are kind of what you'd expect, right? The Samsung T5 and the Samsung 970 are both significantly faster than all the other drives. The thumb drive performs admirably well on sequential read, and the GNARBOX is good. It's good. Again, the My Passport Pro is slower than the GNARBOX, but again, I point to the fact that it's a rotational drive rather than SSD drive, and I think that difference would be significantly less if I was using the My Passport Pro SSD. Write performance is fairly underwhelming on all of these drives through the iPad, but I guess for me at least, I'm not doing a lot of write workload. I'd mostly be pulling photographs off or bringing down video media. So the read workload is what I care the most about. So I just want to say at this point that if you're not a photographer or a filmmaker, then I think it probably makes sense to just pick up something like the Samsung T5 or even the SanDisk thumb drive. If you don't really need the extra features that you're going to get with the GNARBOX and the My Passport Pro, these are cheap drives for the storage that you get. So if you really care about performance, then the T5 is great. And if all you really want is backup and document shuffling, then $20, 64 gigabytes for the thumb drive is kind of a no-brainer. But if you are doing photo work, if you are doing video work, the extra features of the My Passport Pro and of the GNARBOX may be interesting. So let's take a quick look at what they are. Both the My Passport Pro and the GNARBOX have SD card slots that you can put your SD card straight from your camera and back up your media. And this is, I think, where the GNARBOX is probably the clear winner, simply because the user interface directly on the drive is much nicer. So I can put my card in at the side, I can browse through the menus directly on the LCD screen here. I don't really need to open up any app to do anything, and I quite like that. The My Passport Pro, the way you're supposed to do this is you're supposed to hold down this SD card button on top, and you hold that down for 2 seconds and it will trigger an import. If you hold it down for slightly more than 2 seconds though, you'll trigger a WPS Wi-Fi configuration, and the number of times I've done this by accident, I can't even count. So one thing you can do is if you go into the MyCloud app and you can then configure SD cards to auto import the moment you put the card in, which I think is quite a nice feature. Another great feature of both of these drives is you can actually connect an external drive directly into the GNARBOX or the My Passport Pro. For the GNARBOX, this is a USB-C connection, and for the My Passport Pro, this is a standard USB-A connection. When you connect these drives, both of them are treated like they're just another SD card, and you can just back them up straight to the drive. Again, the GNARBOX wins here because it's got a really nice interface, but the My Passport Pro does have the ability to auto import if you want the moment you connect a drive. So both the MyCloud app that comes with the My Passport Pro and the SafeKeep app that comes with the GNARBOX have the ability to preview RAW images that are on the storage. And this is a killer feature for photographers. Sadly though, the My Passport Pro does not support Canon CR3 images, so I can't actually view the RAW images from my Canon EOS R, which has proven to be a bit of a pain, and is definitely one of the things that I like about the GNARBOX. Not sure it's really worth the extra money, but if you are somebody who has a big workflow for photography and you're using a camera that produces CR3 images, then you'll probably want to lean towards the GNARBOX than the My Passport Pro. One of the big promoted features of the GNARBOX is the ability to transcode videos. And what I like about this is that I can plug a drive that I've shot straight to, so I can plug this drive, say from my Canon EOS R, straight into the USB-C port on the GNARBOX. And as I back up the media, I can transcode it as well. This was a really attractive, and this was the feature that really sold me on buying the GNARBOX. Sadly, the reality is really disappointing. I can only transcode to Apple ProRes, which is what I shoot in anyway, or to 720 HD proxy, which is essentially useless for me. What I really wanted was to be able to transcode Apple ProRes into a format that LumaFusion could edit, that was still 4K, but that LumaFusion could edit directly on the iPad. And I don't actually get that with the GNARBOX. So I'm not quite sure what the point of this feature is yet. Hopefully in future firmware releases there'll be more supported transcoding formats, but right now this feature is essentially useless to me. So the question remains, which drive should you buy for your iPad Pro? And whilst I can't tell you what drive I think you should absolutely buy, I can definitely make some suggestions. If you're not doing any photo or any video work, then it makes no sense to buy the GNARBOX. And it probably doesn't make that much sense to buy the My Passport Pro either, even though it is very cheap for 4 terabytes of storage. I really, really love the Samsung T5 drives. They completely blew me away. I shoot directly to them from my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. They've never let me down. And I think if you're looking for a high capacity, fast, small drive to use with the iPad Pro, that is the one I would recommend wholeheartedly. If you don't need high capacity and you don't need a lot of performance, then the tiny SanDisk thumb drive is just fine. It is a great little drive. And I do recommend actually just having one of those in your bag anyway, just because it has that USB-C, USB-A adapter, and what a cool little feature. For photographers, I think the My Passport Pro is the clear winner. It's so much cheaper than the GNARBOX, and because you're not going to be editing directly from the drive, you're still going to be copying files to the iPad to edit them. It's not really worth it for the performance boost. Now, if you're the kind of photographer that's out in bad weather or in rough terrain and you maybe worry about dropping your drives, then sure, the GNARBOX may well work for you, but it is a lot of money. If you're worried about the CR3 format issue with the My Passport Pro, then just do what I do and configure your camera to shoot RAW and JPEG, and that's got me around that issue really easily and without having to spend a ton of money on the GNARBOX. For filmmakers, it's kind of the same story, right? If you're going to be out in bad weather, in rough terrain, then the GNARBOX is great. If you're not going to be in those kind of situations, then it probably makes sense to use the My Passport Pro. In particular, because of the extra storage, 4 terabytes for $230 versus 1 terabyte for $900. Video files are big and you want that extra storage. Now, if the GNARBOX increases the set of transcoding formats, then I think it could become a really interesting device for filmmakers. And what I really want is to be able to shoot in ProRes, transcoding to MP4, and then edit in LumaFusion. If I can get that workflow with the GNARBOX, then I think it will become the go-to device that I use for editing on the go. So that's my review of the GNARBOX. I seriously considered sending it back. I'm holding on to it in the vain hope that the transcoding formats will improve, but I'm not super impressed with it, and I really don't think it's worth the money that I paid. versus the My Passport Pro. I hope that you found this video useful and I hope you found it entertaining. If you have, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and don't just hit subscribe, but hit the bell as well so you don't miss out on any future content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.